Ever feel like you're stuck in a time warp?
Yeah.
I'm like
Mm.
back in high school again,
Yeah.
navigating all those cliques and power struggles.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it turns out those meeting dynamics we all love to hate, they actually have a really long history.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of what people see is like a modern frustration, it actually goes back over a century.
And that's where our deep dive begins today.
Hmm.
We're going behind the scenes of, well, I bet you've heard of it, maybe even used it, Robert's Rules of Order.
Oh, for sure.
But, and here's the thing, the story is so much more than just like dry procedures and all that jargon.
Yeah.
We're talking pig wars,
Big war.
family feuds during the Civil War,
Wow.
and even a connection to social reform movements.
It's amazing, how what seems like just a simple set of rules for meetings, well, it became this like cultural touchstone. It shaped the way we interact and make decisions, like in tons of organizations.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll know why Robert's rules even exist. And you'll also see how they've shaped, well, everything. School boards, community groups, the list goes on.
Absolutely.
And who knows, maybe you'll even find some ideas for how to, run your own meetings a little better.
Fingers crossed. So should we meet the man behind the rules?
Yeah, let's do it.
Henry Martin Robert, brilliant engineer, lived a very interesting life.
Yeah, this guy was like a high achiever right from the start. Like, imagine graduating fourth in your class from West Point
Wow.
at 19.
19. That's incredible.
Not only that, he was already teaching math there, even before he officially graduated.
That's amazing. Speaks volumes about, his intellect and just his dedication. And get this, after West Point, he went on this crazy adventure.
Okay, tell me more.
He was sent out west, to build roads in the Washington Territory, right in the middle of what became known as, wait for it, the Pig War.
The Pig War! Okay, I gotta hear about this.
All right, so picture this. 1859. Tensions are high between the U.S. and Britain over, well, they're fighting over the San Juan Islands off the coast of Washington state.
All right.
And the thing that started this whole international standoff.
Yeah.
A pig.
A pig? Seriously?
Seriously. An American settler, he shot a pig. It belonged to the British Hudson's Bay Company.
Yeah.
And things escalated very quickly from there.
So one pig led to an international incident. That's wild.
Yeah, it sounds kind of funny, right? But it just goes to show how these small conflicts, well, they can get out of control if you don't have clear rules and communication.
Makes sense.
So troops were deployed, they built fortifications, people were even talking about war. And guess who's right in the middle of it all?
Henry Martin Robert?
You got it. He's leading the construction of a defensive earthwork.
Wow. That experience, I mean, it must have had a huge impact on him. Like, talk about a real-world lesson in the importance of order, right? When everything's chaotic.
Absolutely. And you know what? This leads us to the moment, the turning point, that really set Henry Martin Robert on his path to becoming, well, the father of organized meetings.
Okay.
It all went down in New Bedford, Massachusetts, a few years later. Robert. Well, he was elected to chair a town meeting. Seemed like a normal event.
Right.
Except he had no idea what he was supposed to do.
Oh, no. Can you imagine being in charge of a meeting and having absolutely no clue how to run it? We've all probably been in those situations, feeling a bit lost, but this is something else.
Yeah. I can only imagine how frustrating that would be.
Well, some accounts say the meeting went on for 14 hours. It was a disaster, total chaos. Robert swore right then and there that he would never be caught off guard in a meeting again.
And that's how it all began. That experience sparked his lifelong passion to find a way to make meetings, well, efficient and fair.
So he set out to find a solution.
Oh.
And that's where his deep dive into, parliamentary procedure began.
He basically went all in, studied existing parliamentary law,
Yeah.
all those dense legal books, filled with rules and precedents.
I can picture those big, heavy books.
But he quickly realized that those resources, they were way too complicated, too complex for everyday organizations.
I can see that.
He saw a need for something, well, simpler, something practical that anyone could use, even if they didn't have a law degree.
Exactly. And that's where the journey to creating Robert's Rules of Order really started.
So, after years of research, writing the first edition of Robert's Rules of Order, it was finally published in 1876.
1876, wow.
Yeah, but it wasn't easy.
I bet.
He had to self-publish.
Really? That's pretty unusual, especially back then.
It was, and get this, he even paid for most of the printing himself, out of his own pocket.
Wow, that shows some serious commitment.
Oh, absolutely. But the story, well, it doesn't end there.
Okay.
See, his wife, Helen, she was a big part of making the book the success it became.
I love those stories, the unsung heroes behind these big accomplishments.
Right. So Helen, she brought this fresh perspective.
Hmm.
She realized the book, it needed more than just like a list of rules.
Uh-huh.
People needed to know how to actually use them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So she suggested adding a how-to section for beginners.
Like a user manual for your meetings. That's brilliant.
Exactly. By making the book accessible to more people, Helen helped make sure it would have a lasting impact.
Let's do that.
But even with a great book and Helen's input, success, it didn't happen overnight.
So what did he do? Did he like go on a book tour, giving speeches?
He had a different approach.
What did he do?
He sent out 1,000 free copies.
Free copies.
Yep. To influential people, organizations, kind of strategically,
Mhm.
like planting the seeds.
A classic marketing tactic.
And it worked. Robert's Rules of Order became a bestseller, and eventually it became the go-to guide for all sorts of organizations.
It's amazing how that works,
It is. And Robert himself, well, he became like this sought-after expert.
No.
People from all over the country would ask him questions about all those little details of parliamentary procedure.
I can only imagine the kinds of questions he got.
I know, right? But what I find interesting about Robert, he wasn't a stickler for the rules.
What do you mean?
He encouraged people to adapt the rules, make them fit their needs.
That's good.
He always emphasized common sense, flexibility.
So the rules should serve people, not the other way around.
Exactly, which is a good lesson for us today. Sometimes we get so bogged down in all the
I
bureaucracy.
know what you mean.
But his story, it goes beyond just these meeting procedures. He was really involved in social causes.
Really? Like what?
Well, for example, he was a big advocate for Sunday school for Chinese immigrants.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that.
This was during a time when there was a lot of anti-Chinese sentiment.
Wow.
So, you see, his focus on fairness, on order, it wasn't just for meetings, it was part of his life.
Makes you wonder, how much his personal values shaped his work.
Yeah, it suggests that he didn't just want order for the sake of it. He saw these procedures as a tool to promote fairness, make progress.
That's powerful and still relevant today, right? I mean, we're still dealing with these complex social issues.
Exactly. We're still striving for more inclusive, equitable systems.
So we've learned a lot about Henry Martin Robert, but what about his rules?
Right. That's the big question.
Do they still work today, or are they like a relic of the past?
Yeah, it's pretty wild how something written so long ago, well, it can still be controversial today. So are Robert's rules still relevant, or are they kind of outdated?
It's tough to say, it's complicated. On the one hand, Robert's rules, they've become the standard, right, for so many organizations. School boards, community groups, professional associations, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And they provide this framework, for making decisions in a structured way, which can be really helpful. I mean, it can prevent meetings from becoming total chaos.
It's like everyone knows the language of the meeting, so to speak. Exactly. Everyone understands how it works. Everyone gets a chance to participate. But there's another side to this.
Oh, yeah.
There are some criticisms of Robert's rules that, well, they're pretty valid, especially now when we're all more aware of, like, inclusivity and making sure everyone's voice is heard.
So what are people saying? What are the concerns?
One thing people say is that Robert's rules can be too rigid, like they can stifle creativity, and make it hard to have a really open discussion.
I can see that. If you're so focused on following the rules, sometimes you lose track of what you're actually talking about.
Exactly. And some people worry that Robert's rules can actually be used to silence people, especially if someone in a position of power is kind of manipulating the rules.
It's like if you don't know the secret code, you can't get your point across.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's important to remember that Robert's rules, they come from a specific time and place, a cultural context that, well, it might not work for everyone today.
Right. Things have changed.
And there are a lot of people trying new ways to run meetings, methods that focus on collaboration, finding consensus, and making sure everyone feels included.
So it's not like one size fits all.
Exactly. I think the main takeaway here is that whether you love them or hate them, Robert's rules, they got us talking about how we interact in groups, how we make decisions.
And that conversation is still going on, right? I mean, we're still trying to figure out how to make meetings better, more inclusive, more engaging.
It's all about finding that balance between structure, having some rules, and flexibility, being open to new ideas.
It really makes you think about your own experiences. Like, have rules helped you in meetings, or have they made it harder to participate? what would your ideal meeting look like?
Those are great questions. The most important thing is to pay attention to how meetings work,
Mhm.
and try to create an environment where everyone feels respected, where they feel like they have a voice.
Couldn't agree more. And hey, if you're interested in learning more about, different ways to run meetings, all that stuff, we'll be covering more of that in future episodes.
Definitely.
So make sure you subscribe to the deep dive. That way you won't miss out.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive, exploring something new. Who knows what we'll uncover next?